so the goal here is like if I say what's the cosine of negative 3 pi over 5, you'll be able to tell me in your head. That's what we're trying to accomplish. So let's start in degrees first because that's easier for most people. And let's just draw a little unit circle. I'm not even going to draw the circle, but there are like the important numbers that you're supposed to know. We'll write those down first. Everybody in here took pre-calc, right? Or pass out? Or, yeah, okay.
I'm taking it.
Okay. So those are the important ones. Those are the ones you got to be able to know. Sine, cosine, tangent. Secant, cosecant, cotangent. At all of those spots. Where are you from, Dave? Okay, cool. Why'd you move? Or why'd you come here?
We were closer.
Nobody cares. Oh, everyone's laughing. I mean, literally nobody cares.
I'm saying,
I know. I was just giving you some. That's really small, right? You probably know. He's probably smarter than all of us too. That's a fancy school. Alright, so then the way I think about it is there's just little tick marks. Like this first tick mark I'm trying to line up with the 150 and the 30, the second one with the 130 and the 45, then the 120 and the 60, and then the one at the top. Same thing going down, so this should be like the 210 and the 330, the 225 and the 315, the 240 and 300, and the same thing going sideways. And then each one of those tick marks just represents like a distance. So this is, the first one is 1/2, which you could really write as the square root of 1 over 2, because aren't those equal? The square root of 1 over 2 is equal to 1/2. The next one is the square root of 2 over 2. The next one is the square root of 3 over 2. And the next one is the square root of 4 over 2, but if I simplify the square root of 4 over 2, what's that? It's just 1. So there's a pattern, square root of 1, square root of 2, square root of 3, square root of 4. But then like these two simplify, which makes it like not look like a pattern, but it still really is. And then those distances apply in every direction. So you can just go 1/2, square root of 2 over 2, square root of 3 over 2, 1. And then if I'm going this way, they're negative, right? So negative 1/2, negative square root of 2 over 2, negative square root of 3 over 2, and negative 1. And then the same thing going down. Is this on my 80 dollar?
No.
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 Okay, I know. You're being recorded right now, so let's keep that in mind.
She had us like figure it out with like different triangles.
So that triangle way is another really common way. Okay. Yeah. That's all. Yeah. Okay. So, then from there we got to remember that cosine is x values, sine is y values. I know that's not how you spell sine, but I think it'll help you remember it. And tangent is y over x, or sine over cos. It just occurred to me that this marker is not being recorded.
Yeah.
You didn't realize?
Well, I did now. Yeah, so I'll switch my, I'm not going to change right now, but everybody's here anyway. Yeah. Also, this is hard to write, but like, okay, so secant is 1 over cosine, or it's cosine flipped upside down. It's like 1 over a fraction can be confusing, but like if cosine is square root of 3 over 2, secant is 2 over the square root of 3. It just flips upside down. Cosecant is 1 over sine, or sine flipped over. And then cotangent is 1 over tangent, or tan flipped over. And if you can just remember that, that took 5 minutes. I know it's not like simple, but I think that most of you will be able to recreate that chart on your own with a little bit of practice. And then that's all you need. Bless you. So, like a lot of people, when I give them their tests, for almost every test the whole year, the first thing we'll do is flip it over and make that. And then it's there, and you can just use it. But yeah, that's coming from your head, not from your notes. So you got to be able to create it. But I think this pattern thing really helps, because once you remember those 4 numbers, you can just put them in every direction, and here's how it works. So, okay, what's the cosine of 60? Well, cosine is x value, so I'm going to find 60 degrees, and I'm going to go down to the x-axis. It's a half. Once you create it, it's simple. Sine of 135. Well, 135 is here. Sine is x values or y values. Sine is y values, so I jump over the y-axis, square root over 2. What is the sine of 330? Negative 1 half. How'd you get that?
I went to 330 and looked at the y-axis.
That's the y-axis, right? Does that make sense how to use it?
Yeah.
What's the cosine of 210? Negative square root of 3 over 2. I didn't line it up like perfectly, but that's what it's supposed to be. Cosine of 180. Negative 1. Because if I'm over here and I want the x value, like this coordinate would be like negative 1 comma 0, right? Negative 1 is your x value. Sine of 90. 1. Cosine of 90. 0 because the x value there. Tan gets a little tougher because you got like these fractions to flip over. Typically the AP test is pretty friendly about it, and they'll ask you for like tan of 45, which is nice because even though it's a fraction over a fraction, what does that reduce to? That's just 1. Or tan of 135, they could do that too. What's that reduced to? Negative 1. They typically don't ask you like tan of 60, because that becomes like, so tan of 60 would be the square root of 3 over 2 divided by 1 half. We don't divide fractions, we flip over the bottom and we multiply it. And it would end up being the square root of 3. I mean, they could do that. They tend to stick with the 45, 135, 225 thing. But. All right, then you got these. You just find sine, cosine, or tangent first, and you just flip it over. What is secant of 210? So you would find cosine of 210 first. Cosine of 210 is what?
Negative square, or negative 2 over root 3.
Negative square root 3 over 2. And then secant.
So it's 2 over square root 3. Negative 2 over square root 3.
Yeah, I was waiting for one more at some point. It would be negative 2 over the square root of 3. But you're right, like, I don't know why, like, cosine flipped over should be cosecant. You would think that matches up, but but it's the opposite of what you'd expect, which is annoying. Cotangent of 135. Find tangent of 135, then you just flip upside down. So tangent of 135 is negative 1. What's negative 1 flipped over? Still negative 1. So it would be negative 1. What is cotangent of 90? So tangent of 90 would be the y value here divided by the x value here. So tangent of 90 would be 1 divided by 0. So hold on. So what's tangent of 90? 1 divided by 0, which is undefined. It's undefined. I got $1 divided evenly among 0 people. It doesn't make any sense. It's just like that's vanished somehow. So tangent of 90 is 1 over 0. It's undefined. But if I flip it over, what's cotangent?
0.
Now it's 0 over 1, which is what?
0.
Which is 0. Yeah.
So wouldn't that mean that cotangent can also be cosine of a sine?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, because you're just taking this and flipping it over. Perfect. What is cotangent of 180?
It's undefined.
It's undefined. So tangent of 180, because this is really the point negative 1 comma 0. Tangent would be you divide the y value divided by the x value. 0 divided by negative 1. Tangent would be 0. Cotangent, you do negative 1 divided by 0, which is impossible. That's undefined. Questions on how to use this? All right, the next thing is pi is equal to 180 degrees. Think about, like, I'll show you where it comes from. What's the formula for circumference of a circle? 2 pi r. In the unit circle, what's the radius? It's 1, so the circumference is 2 pi. So the circumference in terms of degrees is 360 degrees. That's like if you're just, that's just measuring like how far you're rotating. 2 pi is the distance you go around, so then if I divide that, doesn't it have to be that pi is equal to 180 degrees? So you'll get things like, cosine of 3 pi over 4. And I don't know anybody that thinks in terms of radians. Almost everybody I've ever talked to about, you just replace that with degrees and do the problem that way. Because the answer is going to be one of these fractions. The answer won't be in like degrees or radians. It'll just be a fraction. So put 180. And then don't try to do, I mean you can, but doing 3 times 180 first and then dividing by 4 is a lot harder than doing 180 divided by 4 first and then multiplying by 3. So what's 180 divided by 4? Okay, what's half of 180? 90. What's half of that? 45. So what's 180 divided by 4? It's 45. And then multiply that by 3. Where are we at? 135. 135. What's the cosine at 135? Cosine as you go to the x-axis. So I think I moved my paper or something.
Negative square root 2 over 2.
It's supposed to be negative root 2 over 2 if I had this lined up right.
Your lines are a little off, but it's okay.
So with the radians, you just plug in, reduce, and then go from there. So let's say I asked you to find secant of 5 pi over 6. Try that. I'm just doing it. 180, then I want to do it in degrees. 5 times 180, like I could do that, but it's a lot easier if I cut it down first. So 180 divided by 6 is 30, right? 30 times 5, so this is really the same as the secant of 150. Which really what I'm doing is finding cosine of 150 and then like flipping it over. Like this isn't really proper math notation, but this is what I'm thinking about. So cosine of 150, I'm finding 150, I'm going cosine is x or y? Cosine is x, so I'm going here. Negative square root of 3 over 2, but it's secant, so I flip that over, and you get negative 2 over the square root of 3. And here's one nice thing about calc. How many of you learned like how to rationalize that so there's not a square root on the bottom? AP test doesn't care. So you do not have to simplify. The AP test is really friendly about that. So like, let's say that your answer, you don't have to simplify numbers. If your number calculation works out to the same number as the answer, you're fine. So like, let's say their answer is 11. That's what, you know, you do this whole problem, that your answer is 11, but it's a free response, so you're showing your work. You get down to the bottom, and you have 10 squared minus 90 plus 1. Well, that's 11, right? They would mark that correct. You do not have to simplify. And what I would tell you is don't. Because the only thing that, because this is right, like it is if your answer is 11, the only thing that can happen is bad. If you do 10 squared and you make it 20, then you work out from there and you write down the wrong answer, all of a sudden you're going to lose points that and you have nothing to gain. So don't simplify your math, just like leave it, because all that could happen is you could screw up. Probably won't, but you might. So you don't have to simplify your answer. So you have to simplify this, because it means the same thing as if I rationalize. Questions on what I'm doing up here? Let me put like, I'm just going to write like 3 or 4 of them up here, have you do them. Individually, I'll walk around and check them in a little bit. So, remember the goal is you can do it without that circle. So, if you can do this right now without looking at your circle, that's the best thing possible. And you might, I don't know if you're there yet, but try to start like using that circle less and less and less. I can help you with walking around with you. So like if you miss class and you're watching the video, it's easy to just fast forward, right? Like that's not a big problem. Fair, is that fair enough?
Plus, even if in this class you want to try to work on stuff.
Yeah, you can always just like use the time to do it yourself. You might match up.
I mean, I guess I wouldn't really work with that because you didn't put it on the air.
Yeah. I think this lecture's already on there from last year. feel free to like chat with your neighbor or work together. I expect you to be quiet when I'm talking. If you're like talking while you're working, that's totally fine. That was a new one, I probably should leave that with you first. Yeah. You took pretty good. Very good. Yeah. Start with that. Nothing like unusual or anything. No. You?
I got to have a jeans one there.
No, where?
Jeans one there.
Where?
So, my family phone always.
Yeah.
For charge these.
Good to go through it or not yet? Alright, there we go. Quiet, please. So, secant of 5 power 4. So I'm going to replace that with 180. 180 divided by 4 is 45, times 5 is 225. So I am here. Secant means I'm going to take cosine and flip it over. So cosine, I jump to the x-axis. So it's this guy, but flipped over. So that is negative 2 over the square root of 2. How many are there? True or false? So I might have misspoke a little when I said you didn't have to be able to simplify it. On a free response, you do not. On a multiple choice, you would have to. So let's say your possible answers are A, B, and C. Can you tell me? Don't say it out loud. I want everybody to think about it. Could you tell me which one of those? Oh, sorry, is my monitor here? So, negative 2 over square root of 2 is which one of those behaviors? But don't say it out loud. A, B, or C? Go ahead. We got some different answers. Alright, so I multiply by the square root of 2 and the square root of 2. On the bottom, what would happen? What's the square root of 2 times square root of 2? It's 2. So what happens with this 2 and that 2 is they go away and you're left, it would just be B. You might want to move seats, I guess. Cosine of 480. Well, that's not on the circle. It's too big, so what do I do right away? Subtract 360. So this is really cosine of 120. And then it's just on this, so I'm going to 120, I'm going to the x-axis. That's going to be negative half. Cotan of negative 90. Well, what is the negative in front of the degree tell me I'm supposed to do? Go like the other way, right? So negative 90 is that same amount, but backwards, so I'm down here. So I'm at 270. And then I want the cotangent. So tangent, this point is 0 comma negative 1. So tangent would be negative 1 divided by 0. Cotangent would be 0 divided by negative 1, which is 0. Sine of 7 pi over 6. So again, this is 180. So 180 divided by 6 is 30. 30 times 7 is 210. 210 is here. I want the y value. So that's negative half. How many had all 4 of those? Questions on? Why? I don't understand how you're getting this, or where's this coming from? Anything? Okay. Put your circle away. Like turn the page in the notebook or get out a different sheet or something. And see if you can recreate it. See if you can make the circle without looking at your other circle. Try not to look up at the board, but if you need some help, the degrees are up there. Whenever you're like struggling to recreate, that's what you need to study and practice against. For some of you might be nothing, and then it could be different for everybody. This will help you realize what you don't know. So there's just like the chart with the, you can check in your own notebook too, I guess, but with all the numbers and everything. And then you also, whether you're remembering it or writing it down, you want to be able to remember, you know, cosine is x, sine is y, tan is y over x, secant is which one flipped over. It's cosine flipped over. Again, that's not like proper math notation, but I think you know what it means. Cosecant is sine flipped over, and cotangent is tan flipped over. So that's got like, this is like a chapter of trig in 30 minutes. You've seen it before, so hopefully it's not too bad. How many were able to recreate the whole chart? Questions on anything? Alright. That's a problem. 14, 15. So this is your homework. And again, it's up to you. You know, it's not mandatory, but I am going to check and see if it's done. If you're not doing it, then you're not eligible for retake. The answer's around there. Yeah. How do I check? When? Tomorrow. Beginning of class tomorrow. I'll put up like a warm up. You guys will start on the warm up. I'll walk around and just check names, make sure you did something. And
So if we didn't do it tomorrow, would we be able to do it the next day and turn it in then?
no, because I want it done when we go over it.
Just double check.
Yeah, let's go. Oh my god. This is your row. You're the row captain, which is kind of important choice. Start with this. You want to do crash battles. Because you said it's a circle.
I sat up there the entire time. I had no idea. I was sorry.
Answers around here, I always will give you the answers. To me, like, if you don't get feedback right away, that's not really nearly as useful. So when I'm doing stuff, learning stuff, I check the students know their problem. Did I get it right? Did I get it right? Otherwise, you kind of do the wrong thing over and over again. Yeah.
So for this one, especially since the answer right there, we sure are working on a page and that prepared for it.
So I'm not going to be a stickler about like showing work unless you're like consistently pushing the boundaries on it. Like this, I could do it without showing anything, and I think some of you definitely can too. So I'm not, if you haven't done it. So could you just copy it? I guess, but there's also going to be somewhere like, okay, you better show me something on that,
Yeah.
I don't collect notebooks or anything, but I think what most people prefer is to get like a big 3-ring binder, because I do hand out a lot of stuff, and I'll do a whole bunch of. And I also get a notebook, because obviously everything is on notes, so just keep everything in there. So I'm not gonna. It's not a grade. I'm not gonna look at it. We used to be doing it pretty well.
Do you give out like paper notes or is it just all
Most notes are paper notes. I don't want to say all. So I want you to decide to be like, you suck. But yeah, most. Yeah, top game, you're still doing it in October. Steve, you're still doing it in October.
pretty much. Well, as it gets more difficult, 13 years old. No. Unfortunately, preschool and kindergarten, and then 12. So it's 14. Like us.
No calculators. Use your calculator. Well, don't do that. I know that's great analysis. Yeah. How's that work, Chico?
I'm excited to get this. Show that. I don't have it. I have hackers. I made special covers.
Like for each class.
Yeah.
What is that?
It's like the album covers. They're following album covers. And it's like, let's be real, I spent the most time on yours.
How do you decide which to use?
Well, the albums that I have for this class is called Infinity on High. Well, yesterday you just texted us and said which album should I do? Yeah. And I also put me in the chat. It's like, which one should I do? And I've had to learn some for one is American Student, American Psycho. Yeah, that's a long one. So it's like Psycho is a long. It will be done, I promise.
Good afternoon, everyone. I've got a few announcements for you today. Consortium starts tomorrow. So
I already finished
the consortium class. It will start tomorrow. Tomorrow is an 8-period day that will run for the rest of the week. Lunches will be announced again tomorrow.
Did you guys see if you get your Chromebooks yet?
Cafeteria also will start today. The snack bar will be open after school.
Are there any tutors?
There will be a robotics team for all interested students.
Do you know when you get your Chromebooks yet?
The meeting will be in.
Did you get a Chromebook or iPad or anything in order for?
Yeah.
What?
Meet a
Both? Chromebook and iPad?
Lunch tomorrow.
No, I haven't.
Sorry.
About what EFU has to offer. And look at it.
Yeah, there's the iPad. It didn't apply to you, but you didn't know that actually. Sorry.
At once.
Did she start the rest of the 8 hour
An
day?
8-hour day. Yeah. So tomorrow we go through a 1 to 7, then you have like a homeroom at the end. Every class is a little bit shorter. There'll be a schedule on the board of all your teachers. And then 8th hour, we go down to the auditorium. They give like a little presentation to each grade level.
So I'm thinking about it.
You guys don't get a presentation?
No, because I do.
You're in a,
I'm not as wing, so I don't get any information.
how many of you guys are not in the wing? You know what I'm saying?
Wow. It's whatever, bro.
How many? So who is in the wing? That was last the.
So, because I went to ask Miss Kaiser, and she kind of gave me an attitude about it. And I was like,
What?
I asked her, I was like, so what did I miss, basically? And trying to articulate this, and she's just like, stuff lot. Like, she didn't give me an answer. And
I
then
don't know what the question was. What you missed from
I
what?
asked her, because they had, like,
Oh, did you go to the meeting?
yeah.
What did you miss? Like information?
Yeah.
Seems like they kind of ignore you if you're honest.
Yeah, I emailed her off to you, and it was like, Miss Kaiser basically just told me to like, because, like, I'm not a wing, I'm not going to be honest.
Oh, yeah, great. But it's not gonna happen.
Like for an elective.
That'd be awesome. I
Exactly.
would love that. Because then I can just help people during that hour.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it costs more money. Because basically you got to take a few times class. And that gets, and with multiple teachers, so it gets expensive.
Right. But a study hall could just be a bunch of kids just setting up for it. It wouldn't have to be necessarily a study hall for calculus. Or it just be, and then you could go around and like ask teachers questions if they have a minute, because if they're teaching then that's different. But it's also time to work on homework, and then if they have free time, so you can go and ask questions. It's time to like spend like
We used to have that.
is that the thing down there?
No, it's just everyone's school has study halls. But what happened was 7% of people did really well. So we gave away some time. So my next suggestion was but good, yeah.
Yeah, it helped.
It would.
I was really dreading bringing back to like Hale's lecture. I was just okay. Oh my god. I worked really hard on it, and there's first like 3 subjects I didn't do. 2 of them because I couldn't figure it out. And then one because I just couldn't find the subject. I scrolled down the whole page on like what I did is like I couldn't find some of the stuff before. I realized that I hadn't finished it because I finished my physics summer work before I moved out. And then I realized that I hadn't done yours, and I got distracted, so I was up last night until 12:45.
Where did you live now?
Somewhere else. Let's go talk to Rod about it, because I have his work. I didn't grab my notebook that I showed all his work in it before I got out of the house. So I don't have it. I didn't get it.